The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestone courtyard of Buckingham Palace, as Sergeant James Mitchell adjusted his iconic red tunic and straightened his bearskin hat. At 28 years old, he had served as a Queen's Guard for over 5 years, but the responsibility still filled him with immense pride. Today marked another routine changing of the Guard ceremony, one of London's most beloved tourist attractions that drew thousands of visitors from around the world. James had always been fascinated by the discipline required for his role, standing perfectly still for hours, maintaining composure regardless of weather conditions, and ignoring the countless tourists who attempted to make him break character had become second nature. His military training had prepared him well, but nothing could have prepared him for what was about to unfold on this seemingly ordinary Tuesday morning in late September. The crowd began gathering early, as they always did. Families with excited children pressed against the palace gates, cameras and smartphones ready to capture the timeless ceremony. Among the spectators was the Henderson family from Manchester, who had saved for months to bring their 2 young children to London for their first visit to the capital. 8-year-old Emma Henderson clutched her father's hand tightly, her eyes wide with wonder at the grandeur of the palace, while her younger brother Tommy bounced excitedly on his toes. What the Hendersons didn't know was that their neighbor's dog had somehow escaped from their hotel room 3 blocks away. Zeus, a 2-year-old American pit bull terrier, had been left alone while his owners went for breakfast. The powerful dog had managed to work loose from his collar and had wandered through the busy London streets, his anxiety growing with each passing minute as unfamiliar sights and sounds overwhelmed his senses. Zeus had never been away from his home territory before. The cacophony of traffic, the press of strangers, and the maze of unfamiliar streets had triggered his fight-or-flight response. His owners, Mark and Sarah Collins, had rescued him from a difficult situation 2 years earlier, and while they had worked tirelessly to socialize him, Zeus still struggled with new environments and stressful situations. The dog's powerful muscles tensed as he navigated through the crowded streets, his breathing becoming more labored as panic began to set in. Meanwhile, Sergeant Mitchell took his position outside the palace gates, his rifle held at the perfect angle, his expression stoic and professional. The familiar weight of his uniform and the routine of the ceremony provided him with a sense of calm and purpose. He had performed this duty hundreds of times, and the predictable nature of the role allowed his mind to focus on the honor of serving his country and protecting the royal family. The crowd pressed closer as the ceremony time approached, creating a dense wall of spectators along the palace railings. Children pointed excitedly at the guards. Tourists snapped photos, and street performers nearby added to the festive atmosphere. The energy was palpable, filled with anticipation and joy, as visitors from around the globe witnessed one of Britain's most enduring traditions. It was at this moment that Zeus rounded the corner, his confusion and fear reaching a critical point. The sight of the massive crowd, the noise, and the unfamiliar uniformed figures sent his stress levels soaring. In his panicked state, the dog's natural protective instincts kicked in, and he perceived the still, uniformed guard as a potential threat that needed to be confronted. His powerful legs propelled him forward as he broke into a run, heading directly toward Sergeant Mitchell with the intensity that only a frightened and confused animal could display. The first person to notice the approaching dog was a young photographer from Germany who had been focusing his telephoto lens on the guards. Through his viewfinder, he saw the muscular pit bull charging across the courtyard, its powerful stride covering ground quickly as it headed straight for the motionless guard. The photographer's heart raced as he realized what was about to happen, but the events were unfolding too quickly for him to do anything more than continue shooting. Capturing what would soon become an extraordinary sequence of photographs, Sergeant Mitchell's peripheral vision caught the movement first. Years of military training had honed his awareness to pick up even the slightest motion in his surroundings, despite maintaining his rigid stance. The approaching blur of brown and white fur registered in his mind, but his discipline demanded that he remain perfectly still. However, as the dog drew closer, covering the distance with alarming speed, even his exceptional self-control began to waver. The crowd's reaction was instantaneous and varied. Gasps echoed through the morning air as people pointed and stepped back instinctively. Children began to cry, and parents pulled their young ones closer to their bodies. Some tourists continued filming, recognizing they were witnessing something unprecedented, while others scrambled to get out of the way. The festive atmosphere transformed in seconds into one of tension and uncertainty. Zeus's powerful legs carried him across the final stretch of courtyard, his eyes fixed on the tall, still figure in the red uniform. In the dog's confused and frightened mind, this motionless human represented everything that felt wrong about his current situation: the unfamiliarity, the crowds, the noise, and now this strange person who stood unnaturally still, all combined to trigger his most basic survival instincts. As the pitbull closed the distance, Sergeant Mitchell made a split-second decision that would define the entire encounter. Instead of following protocol to remain motionless or to take defensive action, something deeper kicked in. Perhaps it was his childhood spent growing up on his grandmother's farm, where he had learned to read animal behavior, or maybe it was simply an intuitive understanding that this was not a malicious attack, but rather the actions of a frightened creature. The moment Zeus reached him, instead of bracing for impact or trying to ward off the dog, Mitchell did something that shocked everyone present. He slowly and deliberately knelt down to one knee, bringing himself to the dog's level. His movement was controlled and calm, designed not to startle or further agitate the already stressed animal. His years of training had taught him that sudden movements could escalate dangerous situations, and his instincts told him this principle applied to animals as well as humans. Zeus skidded to a halt just inches from the kneeling guard, his momentum carrying him slightly past his target. The dog's aggressive posture began to shift as confusion replaced his fight-or-flight response. This human wasn't behaving as expected. Instead of showing fear or aggression, the guard had made himself smaller and less threatening. Zeus circled, back, his breathing still heavy, but his body language beginning to show signs of uncertainty rather than pure aggression. The crowd fell silent, creating an almost supernatural quiet in what had been a bustling, noisy environment just moments before. Hundreds of people held their breath as they watched the unprecedented scene unfold. Cameras continued to click and whir, but even the photographers seemed to move more quietly, sensing they were witnessing something extraordinary. Mitchell remained, perfectly still in his kneeling position, allowing Zeus to investigate him. The guard's experience with animals told him that patience would be key. He could smell the dog's stress, see the tension in its muscles, and recognize the signs of an animal that was more frightened than truly aggressive. His grandmother had always told him that animals could sense a person's intentions, and he focused on projecting calm and non-threatening energy. Zeus began to circle the kneeling guard, his nose working to process the new scents and information. The dog's posture gradually relaxed as his investigation continued. The guard's stillness, combined with his non-threatening position, began to work its magic. Zeus's tail, which had been rigid and high, started to lower slightly. His panting became less frantic, and the wild look in his eyes began to soften. The tension in the crowd remained palpable, but fascination began to mix with fear as people realized they were watching something remarkable unfold. Parents explained in hushed whispers to their children what was happening, while tourists from around the world captured what would soon become viral footage of an extraordinary moment of human-animal connection. Police officers had been alerted and were making their way through the crowd, but they too seemed reluctant to interrupt what appeared to be a delicate and successful de-escalation. Animal control had been called, but the nearest unit was still several minutes away, leaving Mitchell and Zeus in their strange standoff while hundreds of people watched in amazement. After what felt like an eternity but was actually only 3 minutes, Zeus made a decision that would touch the hearts of everyone present. The powerful dog, his investigation complete and his fears beginning to subside, approached the still kneeling guard and gently placed his massive head against Mitchell's shoulder. The gesture was so unexpected and tender that several people in the crowd gasped audibly. Mitchell felt the weight and warmth of the dog's head against his uniform, and something remarkable happened. Without breaking his disciplined composure, he allowed his free hand to slowly move towards Zeus, offering his knuckles for the dog to sniff. The movement was so gradual and gentle that it seemed almost choreographed, though it was purely instinctive. Zeus investigated the offered hand thoroughly, his wet nose working to gather information about this unusual human who had responded to his fear with such unexpected kindness. The transformation in Zeus was visible to everyone watching. His body, language shifted from tense and aggressive to curious and increasingly calm. His tail, which had been stiff with stress, began to wag slightly. It wasn't the enthusiastic wagging of a happy, familiar dog, but rather the cautious movement of an animal beginning to feel safe. The crowd recognized this shift, and the collective tension began to ease slightly. Dr. Sarah Wellington, a veterinarian who happened to be among the tourists that day, watched the interaction with professional fascination. She had seen many cases of stressed animals, and she recognized that the guard's response had been absolutely perfect. By making himself smaller and less threatening, remaining calm and patient, and allowing the dog to investigate on its own terms, he had managed to de-escalate what could have been a dangerous situation for both himself and the animal. Meanwhile, 3 blocks away, Mark and Sarah Collins had discovered their empty hotel room and were frantically searching the streets for Zeus. Their panic was overwhelming as they imagined their beloved pet lost in the maze of London streets. They had split up to cover more ground, with Mark heading toward the Thames and Sarah making her way toward the Palace District, following a tip from a hotel guest who thought they had seen a dog matching Zeus's description heading in that direction. Backer. At the palace, Mitchell made another decision that would define the encounter. Still kneeling and with Zeus now calmly investigating his uniform, he began to speak in low, soothing tones. His voice was barely audible to the crowd, but Zeus's ears perked up at the gentle sounds. The guard's words were simple and repetitive, designed to provide comfort rather than commands. Easy, boy. You're okay. Easy now, Mitchell whispered, his voice carrying the same calm authority he had learned to use in high-stress military situations, but softened with genuine compassion for the frightened animal. Zeus responded to the voice by moving closer, his large body now pressed against the kneeling guard. The sight of the powerful Pitbull, who moments before had appeared menacing and aggressive, now seeking comfort from the very person he had seemed to be attacking, created a profound emotional impact on everyone watching. Several people in the crowd wiped away tears, moved by the unexpected display of trust and gentleness. The other guards in the area had maintained their positions, but their awareness of the situation was evident in their subtle body language. They were ready to act if needed, but they also recognized that their colleague had achieved something remarkable. The situation was under control, and any intervention at this point might undo the delicate trust that had been established. A young girl in the crowd, no more than 6 years old, tugged on her mother's sleeve and asked in a voice loud enough for others to hear, "Mummy, why is the soldier helping the scared doggy?" Her innocent question captured the essence of what everyone was witnessing, the fundamental human capacity for compassion that transcends duty and protocol. The answer to her question was becoming clearer with each passing moment. Zeus had found exactly what he needed, a calm, strong presence in the chaos of his frightening experience. Mitchell had recognized that behind the aggressive approach was simply a lost, scared animal who needed help rather than punishment. The connection between them was growing stronger, visible in the way Zeus's breathing had returned to normal, and how he had begun to relax his powerful muscles. As the minutes passed, it became clear that this was no longer a dangerous situation requiring emergency intervention. Instead, it had transformed into something beautiful, a demonstration of how understanding and patience could turn a potentially tragic encounter into a moment of profound connection between species. The crowd continued to watch in respectful silence, many realizing they were witnessing something they would remember and talk about for the rest of their lives. 20 minutes into this extraordinary encounter, Sarah Collins rounded the corner and saw the crowd gathered around the palace gates. Her heart sank as she feared the worst, but as she pushed through the gentle crowd of onlookers, someone pointed toward the center of attention and whispered, "Your dog is safe, love. Look at that." What Sarah saw when she reached the front of the crowd left her speechless. Zeus, her powerful and sometimes unpredictable rescue dog, was lying calmly beside the kneeling royal guard, his head resting peacefully against the man's leg. The transformation was so complete that Sarah barely recognized her pet. Gone was the anxious, aggressive posture she had feared he would display in such a stressful situation. Instead, Zeus appeared more relaxed than she had seen him in months. Mitchell noticed the woman's approach and the way Zeus's ears perked up, and his tail began to wag with genuine enthusiasm for the first time during their encounter. Without breaking his calm demeanor, he spoke quietly to Sarah. "I believe this handsome fellow belongs to you." His voice carried warmth and understanding, completely devoid of any accusation or anger despite the disruption Zeus had caused. Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she knelt beside her dog and the guard. "I'm so sorry," she began, but Mitchell gently shook his head. "No apologies needed, ma'am. He was just scared and looking for help. He's a good boy, just needed someone to understand that." The guard's words were simple, but they carried a depth of compassion that moved not just Sarah, but everyone within earshot. Zeus's reunion with Sarah was tender and emotional. The dog's relief was evident as he pressed against his owner while still maintaining contact with Mitchell. It was as if he didn't want to lose the sense of security he had found with the guard, but was overjoyed to be reunited with familiar human. The three of them created a touching tableau that had the crowd watching with rapt attention and genuine emotion. Dr. Wellington approached the group slowly, introducing herself and offering her professional assessment of the situation. "What you did was remarkable," she told Mitchell. "You read that dog perfectly. He wasn't aggressive by nature, just overwhelmed and frightened. Your response likely prevented what could have been a tragic situation for everyone involved." Her words validated what everyone had witnessed: the power of understanding and compassion to transform a dangerous situation. The police officers who had been making their way through the crowd arrived to find a scene completely different from what they had expected. Instead of an aggressive animal incident requiring forceful intervention, they discovered a peaceful resolution that had captivated hundreds of people. Senior Constable Williams, a 20-year veteran of the Metropolitan Police, had never seen anything quite like it in his career. As Sarah prepared to lead Zeus away from the scene, something unexpected happened. The dog was reluctant to leave Mitchell's side. He kept looking back at the guard, his tail wagging, as if recognizing that this human had provided him with something special during his moment of greatest need. Mitchell, still maintaining his professional composure but clearly moved by the connection they had formed, reached out one final time to stroke Zeus's head gently. "Thank you," Sarah whispered to Mitchell, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know how to repay you for what you did. Zeus has had a difficult past, and what you gave him today, that kindness and patience, it means more than you can know." Mitchell's response was characteristically humble. "Just doing what felt right, ma'am. Take care of him. He's special." The crowd, which had been silent witnesses to this extraordinary interaction, began to applaud spontaneously. The applause started softly but grew as more people joined in, creating a wave of appreciation that filled the courtyard. It wasn't just applause for Mitchell's actions, but recognition of something beautiful they had all shared in witnessing. Young Emma Henderson, who had been watching the entire encounter with wide eyes, turned to her father and said, "Daddy, that soldier is a hero, isn't he?" Her father, like many in the crowd, found himself struggling to find words to describe what they had all witnessed. It was heroism, but of a quiet, compassionate kind that didn't involve weapons or dramatic action. As Sarah finally began to lead Zeus away, the dog continued to look back at Mitchell, who had now returned to his standing position, but remained, watching their departure. There was something in that final exchange of glances between human and animal that spoke to a connection that transcended the brief time they had shared. Zeus had found help when he needed it most, and Mitchell had discovered something about himself and his capacity for compassion that would stay with him long after his shift ended. The photographer who had first noticed Zeus's approach had captured the entire sequence, but he found himself reluctant to immediately share the images. What he had witnessed felt too precious, too personal to simply upload without consideration. This wasn't just a news story. It was a testament to the best of human nature, and it deserved to be treated with the respect such moments commanded. News of the extraordinary encounter began to spread even before Sarah and Zeus had left the palace grounds. Social media posts from dozens of witnesses started appearing online, each telling their version of the remarkable story they had just witnessed. The hashtag #NotAGardenDog began trending within hours, as people from around the world shared their amazement at the compassionate response they had seen captured in photos and videos. The story reached the offices of major news networks by evening, but what made this particular story special was not just what had happened but how it had been handled. The German photographer Klaus Hoffmann, who had captured the entire sequence, made a decision that surprised his editors. Instead of selling the exclusive photos immediately, he reached out to find Sergeant Mitchell and Sarah Collins, wanting their permission before making the images public. When Klaus finally connected with them both, their responses revealed the character that had made the original encounter so special. Mitchell was reluctant to seek any publicity, insisting that he had simply done what anyone would have done in his position. Sarah, meanwhile, was eager for the story to be told, but for reasons that had nothing to do with fame or attention for herself. "People need to see this," Sarah explained to Klaus over the phone. "Zeus is a rescue dog, and pit bulls have such a terrible reputation. But look what happened when someone saw past his breed and his fear to the good dog underneath. Maybe this story can help people understand that these dogs aren't monsters. They just need patience and understanding, like any other animal." Mitchell's commanding officer, Major Patricia Thornton, had been briefed on the incident and had initially been concerned about the breach in protocol. However, after reviewing the situation and speaking with witnesses, her perspective shifted dramatically. "Sergeant Mitchell showed exceptional judgment," she told the press officer. "His actions prevented what could have been a dangerous situation and demonstrated the values we hope all our guards embody: duty, honor, and compassion." The story officially broke on BBC News 3 days later, with Klaus's photographs and video footage providing stunning visual evidence of the encounter. The images showed the progression from Zeus's aggressive approach to his peaceful rest beside the kneeling guard, capturing a transformation that spoke to something fundamental about trust and understanding between species. Public reaction was overwhelmingly positive, but it went deeper than simple appreciation for a heartwarming story. The encounter had touched something profound in people's understanding of both human nature and animal behavior. Dr. Wellington, the veterinarian who had witnessed the event, was contacted by multiple media outlets for her professional perspective on what had occurred. "What Sergeant Mitchell demonstrated was perfect animal psychology," she explained in interviews. "He recognized that Zeus's aggression was fear-based, not true aggression. By making himself smaller and non-threatening, he allowed the dog's natural social instincts to take over. It was textbook de-escalation, but done purely on instinct and compassion." The royal family's office issued a statement expressing their admiration for Mitchell's handling of the situation. While they didn't break protocol by commenting extensively, their brief statement noting their pride in the exemplary service and character demonstrated by our guards was seen as high praise. Indeed, Zeus's transformation didn't end when he left the palace grounds. Sarah reported that her dog seemed calmer and more confident in the days following the encounter, as if his experience with Mitchell had given him a new understanding that not all strangers were threats. The patient, calm response he had received during his moment of greatest stress had apparently taught him something valuable about the world. Schools began using the story as a teaching tool about kindness, empathy, and looking beyond surface appearances. Children wrote letters to Sergeant Mitchell, many including drawings of the scene they had seen on the news. One particularly touching letter from 8-year-old Amy Thompson read, "Dear soldier, thank you for being nice to the scared doggy. My mom says that's how we should treat everyone who's scared, even if they seem mean at first." The story also sparked conversations about animal rescue and the challenges faced by dogs with difficult pasts. Adoption agencies reported increased interest in pit bull-type dogs, with many potential adopters specifically mentioning the palace incident as what had changed their minds about the breed. Sarah Collins found herself becoming an unofficial spokesperson for rescue organizations, sharing Zeus's story and advocating for patient, understanding approaches to animal rehabilitation. Mitchell, meanwhile, continued his duties as a royal guard but found that tourists now looked at him with a different kind of respect and admiration. Children would wave at him with special enthusiasm, and he occasionally received small gifts left at the palace gates, with notes thanking him for his kindness to Zeus. While he remained professional and didn't acknowledge these gestures during his duty hours, those who knew him said he was deeply moved by the public response. The encounter had changed everyone involved in ways they were still discovering. What had started as a moment of crisis had become a testament to the power of compassion and understanding, to transform fear into trust, aggression into peace, and strangers into friends. The story continued to be shared and retold, inspiring people around the world to look beyond surface appearances and respond to fear with patience rather than force. 6 months after the extraordinary encounter at Buckingham Palace, the ripple effects of that September morning continued to spread in ways no one could have predicted. Sergeant James Mitchell received a commendation from his regiment, not for military valor in the traditional sense, but for demonstrating the highest ideals of service through compassion and wisdom under pressure. The ceremony was small and private, exactly as Mitchell had requested, but the significance was not lost on anyone present. Zeus had undergone a remarkable transformation that went far beyond his initial recovery from the stressful encounter. Sarah Collins enrolled him in therapy dog training, and his natural gentleness, once properly channeled, made him an ideal candidate for the program. The same dog who had once charged across the palace courtyard in fear and confusion now spent his days providing comfort to patients in children's hospitals and visiting elderly residents in care homes. The most profound change, however, came in the form of an unexpected friendship. Mitchell had requested permission from his superiors to visit Zeus and Sarah during his off-duty time, and what began as a simple check on the dog's well-being evolved into a meaningful relationship. Sarah discovered that Mitchell shared her passion for animal rescue, and together they began volunteering at a local shelter that specialized in rehabilitating dogs with behavioral challenges. Their work at the shelter became a natural extension of what had happened at the palace that day. Mitchell's calm presence and intuitive understanding of animal psychology proved invaluable in helping fearful and aggressive dogs learn to trust humans again. His military discipline translated perfectly to the patient, consistent approach needed for animal rehabilitation, while his newfound understanding of his own capacity for compassion added a gentleness that surprised even him. The German photographer, Klaus Hoffmann, used his documentation of the encounter to create a photo exhibition called The Moment of Understanding, which toured galleries across Europe and eventually made its way to New York and Tokyo. The exhibition raised significant funds for animal rescue organizations and sparked conversations about the nature of fear, aggression, and the healing power of compassion. Klaus donated all proceeds from the exhibition to shelters and rescue groups, saying that the story belonged to all the animals still waiting for their own moment of understanding. Dr. Sarah Wellington published a paper in the Journal of Veterinary Behavior analyzing the encounter and its implications for animal handling techniques. Her research highlighted how Mitchell's instinctive response aligned perfectly with modern understanding of animal psychology and stress reduction. The paper became required reading in several veterinary programs and helped establish new protocols for handling frightened or aggressive animals in various professional settings. The encounter had also profoundly impacted the witnesses who were present that day. Many reported that watching the transformation from aggression to trust had changed how they approached their own relationships and conflicts. Emma Henderson, the 8-year-old who had watched with wide eyes, wrote a school essay about the day that earned her recognition in a national writing contest. Her essay, titled "When the Soldier Helped the Scared Dog," became a viral sensation when her teacher shared it online. The Royal Guard protocols were quietly updated to include training, modules on animal encounters, with Mitchell himself contributing to the development of the program. His experience had demonstrated that rigid adherence to rules wasn't always the best approach, and that sometimes the greatest service came from recognizing when compassion should override protocol. The new training emphasized situational awareness and appropriate response to non-human interactions, Zeus became something of a celebrity in his local community, but more importantly, he became a symbol of redemption and second chances. His story was featured in a documentary about rescue dogs, and Sarah frequently spoke at events about the importance of understanding animal behavior and responding to fear with patience rather than punishment. The dog, who had once been seen as dangerous, was now helping to change perceptions about his entire breed. On the first anniversary of their encounter, Mitchell and Sarah returned to Buckingham Palace with Zeus for a private visit. The location of their meeting had been marked with a small memorial plaque installed by Klaus Hoffmann and the photography community, reading simply, "Here, understanding triumphed over fear." Zeus seemed to remember the place, and he calmly walked to the exact spot where he had once approached in panic and fear, now approaching with confidence and peace. Mitchell knelt in the same position he had taken a year earlier, and Zeus, now, wearing his therapy dog vest, placed his head against the guard's shoulder in the same gesture that had moved the crowd to tears. But this time there was no fear, no confusion, only recognition and friendship between two beings who had found something precious in each other during a moment of crisis. The story of the frenzied pitbull who attempted to attack a royal guard, only to find understanding and compassion instead, had become more than just a news story. It had become a parable about the power of looking beyond surface appearances, about responding to fear with patience, and about the extraordinary things that can happen when we choose empathy over defense. The encounter lasted only minutes, but its impact would continue to ripple outward for years to come, touching lives and changing perspectives in ways both large and small, proving that sometimes the most powerful acts of heroism are also the gentlest.